Right then, these pedals here that I picked up on AliExpress, they've got a titanium axle, a carbon composite body, and they've got a cool little kind of carbon spring mechanism on the back there. So these are super lightweight. They're seemingly pretty well built as well, and they are complete knockoffs of these pedals from Time, these Xpresso 12 pedals here. So yeah, how do the knockoffs, how do they stack up to the originals, and how can they create something so similar for basically less than a quarter of the price of these original pedals here? Yeah, they've cut some really interesting corners putting these knockoffs together. So yeah, without further ado, let's check them out. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another. Oh God, that is such a disappointment. Trace Velo production, my name, as always. Yeah, it's Luke. Right then, these pedals, yeah, these ones here, they look pretty funky, I've got to say, and they are all over AliExpress and eBay under the brand name Costelo, which hopefully you can read there. So I picked up my set on AliExpress for just over 50 quid, but with the fees, basically the import duties post-Brexit. Yeah, you can slap an extra 20% on top of that. So these were just over 60 quid delivered to my door. Now the design will be very familiar to a lot of you out there, but for those of you that aren't aware, I mentioned it at the beginning, but these are basically indistinguishable, at least visually, from these pedals here, from a company called Time. These are their Xpresso 12 pedals. Now this design has actually been discontinued by Time, and as of 2018, they now look like this, and they're called their X Pro 12, I believe. Now, I managed to pick up pretty much the very last pair of these older style pedals that I could find on Amazon a couple of weeks back for 212 quid. That's what I paid, and that's the rate these have pretty much always gone for, between kind of 200 and 250 quid. So the OGs here, the real deal, pretty much 4 times the cost of these knockoffs here. So let's compare the two, and there are some really interesting differences between them. Yeah, trust me. Now I'm sure it's obvious, but I've paid for all of the pedals that I'm showing today with my own money. So please subscribe, if only to offset the cost that I've put into this episode. I've paid like 300 quid for pedals for this episode. So yeah. Anyway, enough whinging from me, and yeah, let's check these out. Okay, so these are the knockoff Costelo pedals, and when I first got hold of them, I was actually, yeah, I was pretty impressed. So the build quality seems good, a little plasticky maybe, but that's a byproduct of the fact the main body, so the black material, is injection molded plastic, but it's reinforced with carbon fibers to give it enhanced strength and durability. The red parts are glass fiber reinforced plastic, again a very strong and durable material. The axles, hollow titanium, or at least I'm pretty sure they're titanium. It's what's stated on all the listings. They're non-magnetic and they haven't rusted, so they're definitely not steel, and they're certainly not aluminium either. So yeah, all in all, pretty good for 50 quid. Yeah, right then, so you've had a good look at these knockoffs. Now let's take a look at the real deal. So here are the Time Xpresso 12, sometimes called the Xpresso 12 Titan pedals. They're made of almost exactly the same materials, and at a casual glance, seemingly the only difference between these and the Costelo knockoffs are the brand name and logos slapped across them. In fact, I've measured them with my calipers, and the dimensions are both identical, really. I mean, here are some side-by-side images, and yeah, I'm sure it's pretty obvious. The knockoffs either use the same molds, or the manufacturer has created molds based on the original Time pedals. I mean, even the declaration "Made in France" is copied across. The Time pedals definitely are made in France. The Costelo ones, I mean, I can't be 100% certain that they weren't made there, but the Costelo Sports Technology company operates out of Guangdong province in mainland China. So yeah, I'm pretty sure they probably weren't made in France. Anyway, let's check the weights quickly. The legit Time pedals come in at 154 grams, and the Costelos come in fractionally lighter at 152. So yeah, visually, dimensionally, and weightily, they are to all intents and purposes the same really. But let's dive a little deeper into the differences, because yeah, this is where it gets interesting. But before we do, I know I've asked already, but if you could hit subscribe and maybe the like button as well, if you're enjoying this stuff, really does help. So yeah, thank you in advance. Anyway, let's crack on. Okay, so first off, the red color of the plastics is definitely a little more muted on the Costelo pedals. The red of the Time pedals is nice and vibrant, whereas the Costelo red is definitely a little less saturated, kind of a lighter shade. It's quite slight and difficult to catch on camera, but you can see it well in this clip. There's definitely a difference. Now, next up, the finishing of the kind of plastics is much better on the Time pedals. There are some sharper, unfinished edges on the Costelo ones, and you can see that here on the red cap around the axle. The Costelo pedals definitely have kind of a little irregularity on some of the edges. Now, I have a feeling that the actual molds that the Time pedals came out of, I think they're much better maintained than the Costelo ones, actually. Right, now, not to get into too much detail, but carbon and glass fiber reinforced plastics like these pedals are made out of, they're really tough and durable materials, and consequently they wear out the injection molds that these parts come out of much quicker than your generic ABS plastics. Now, companies that focus on quality, like Time in this scenario, they will tend to replace these molds on a regular basis, but those molds are very expensive to produce. So those companies focusing more on quantity and lower cost, like Costelo in this scenario, they'll use the molds for longer. They'll still get parts out of them, but the surface finishing of those parts, it will take a little bit of a hit. And you can see this if you directly compare these two pedals side by side. Now, the Time pedals have nice consistent edges, and there are areas where the plastics are smooth and shiny, kind of straight out of the mold. If you look at the same area on the Costelo pedals, the surface finishing is rougher, and there are some tags actually where the parting surfaces of the molds are not 100% flush, and some like material has squeezed into there. Now, it's worth pointing out, with these visual discrepancies, you would struggle to spot them unless you had them side by side like I have here. But the next few differences are much more pronounced. So let's get into it. Now, it's worth pointing out at this point that the kind of materials that both of these pedals are constructed out of, so the black and red composite plastics there, the titanium axles, and even these kind of carbon springs on the back, they seem to be of a relatively similar quality between the two sets of pedals. So apart from the finishing of these parts, what are the differences, and where have the costs been cut to bring down the costs of manufacture for these Costelo pedals? Well, the first thing that I actually noticed was the titanium axles. Now, first off, I'm not a metallurgist. The grade of titanium between the two sets of pedals might be slightly different, but I certainly couldn't tell any difference. And they're both hollowed out as well to reduce weight a little bit further. But check this out. So on the legitimate Time pedals, the left axle has a groove carved in it, kind of to indicate that it goes on the left-hand side of the bike. This is mentioned in the manual that you get with the pedals, and it's also reflected in the new X-Pro design as well. That's kind of the updated pedal design. The Costelo pedals, on the other hand, they don't have a groove. They have an L and an R laser or acid etched into the metal. Now, presumably this is a cost-cutting measure. It means they don't have to mill out a groove in kind of 50% of the axles they produce. So apart from the threading, both of the axles for the pedals can be identical, so save a little bit of cost in manufacture. Now, the funny thing about that is that I found loads of listings on eBay and the like for Time Xpresso pedals where there was no groove present in the left axle. It usually had that L and R stamped in them. Now, definitely correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on this one, but from what I can see, Time have always included this groove in the left axle, and without it, it's a key indicator that the pedals that you've got are not genuine. Now, I reckon a few years ago, the market was flooded with loads of counterfeit pedals from China that were essentially the same quality as these ones here, but they had the Time logos and branding kind of slapped all over them. And I think at that point, a lot of people were duped into thinking they were buying the genuine article when it was just a kind of a counterfeit pedal, basically. However, I think at that point, the Chinese manufacturers faced a lot of legal pressure and just kind of kept the design and changed the name. Hence how we got these Costelo pedals here. Now, I could be completely wrong on this, but that's my working hypothesis at the moment. In fact, you can still find a couple of listings floating around for what I believe are these counterfeit pedals, actually. Like this one that's still up on eBay. Claims they're the genuine article, kind of lists them by name, but there's no groove in that left axle. Very suspicious, if you ask me. Yeah. Definitely a little suspect. Anyway, we're getting a little bit sidetracked here because there are still a couple of other differences between these pedals. Okay, so on the Time pedals here, these end caps, if I bring them together, they're both different. They're different on each pedal. So on the bottom pedal here, you can see the arrows point anti-clockwise, and on the top, the arrows are pointing clockwise. And that's basically to get these caps on and off and service the axle and the bearings and stuff. Both of these caps, well, they turn in opposite directions, and that's quite a common practice actually. It stops them unthreading under load when you're cycling along. Bit of a safety feature. Whereas on these Costelo ones, you'll see both of these end caps, they turn anti-clockwise. Yeah, now that's a cost-cutting measure basically. So it means that you only need to produce one version of this cap, and the assembly step for both pedals is the same because they both screw on the same way. Okay, so diving inside the pedals, I'll zoom in there. Yeah, there are some other ingenious little changes. So the first is pretty obvious. So on the Time pedals here, you can see it uses a sealed bearing, basically. You can see that black rubber seal. The Costelo pedals, on the other hand, I'll pull this one out. This uses it's a shielded bearing. Now, not to get into too much detail, but bearings like this, these shielded bearings, are usually reserved for very high RPM applications because in general, the shield doesn't contact the inner bearing ring, so there's less friction associated with these bearings, so they'll spin a little bit faster. The trade-off is that water and dust can really easily ingress past those shields and basically ruin the bearing. Now, the rubber sealed or RS bearings that the Time pedals use here, they will have a slight increase in drag compared to those shielded bearings in the Costelo pedals due to friction between that rubber seal and the inner bearing ring. But these are much better at keeping kind of crud and moisture out of the bearing. The RS bearings are basically a much better choice for this particular application. But the important factor here when looking at these shielded bearings with Costelo is the fact that these will have been a few pence cheaper to buy, hence their inclusion here in these Costelo pedals. Now, you may have noticed this as I was kind of pulling them apart, but the grease is different between these two pedals. You can see a little bit there, but the grease on the Costelo pedals is red. Now, I'm not an expert, and I don't believe there's an industry standard for the kind of coloring of grease. But as far as I'm aware, red grease tends to indicate either a multi-purpose grease or a rubber-specific grease designed to kind of protect rubber seals. Whereas the grease on these Time pedals here is neon yellow. It just feels much stickier and kind of much more premium and better quality. Reminds me of the premium Shimano grease actually, which has specific ZDDP anti-wear additives. So basically, I think the grease they use on these Time pedals is better quality, and I suspect it's probably more expensive as well. Now, the last difference between these pedals is actually the most difficult to spot. So inside the pedals, kind of down here where the end of the axle is, these Time pedals use a needle roller bearing against the axle. I tried to get some footage and hopefully you can see it here, but it basically looks a little bit something like this. And now the Costelo pedals, on the other hand, yeah, these guys went for pretty much the cheapest possible option. It's not even a bearing inside here. They just used a white nylon bushing, and yeah, hopefully you can see it in this footage. But it's super cheap, but probably won't last very long at all. And in fact, you've probably already seen the grease has turned black already. So presumably in combination with this pretty low quality grease and the relatively soft titanium metal, I suspect it started to wear out slightly. So yeah, there you have it. At a casual glance, both pedals seem to be pretty similar actually, but digging a little bit deeper, basically, these Costelo pedals are a masterclass in cost cutting. But all that being said, what do these knockoffs actually like to use out on the road? Right then, we're out on some pretty nice Oxfordshire country roads this afternoon, and let's quickly talk functional differences between these two pedal systems, because I've got the Costelos on the bike at the minute, and honestly, I can't tell any difference between these and the Time pedals when they're on the bike. I mean, they just feel the same. Even the cleats are actually interchangeable between the two. But actually, before picking up these Costelo pedals, I'd never used this pedal system before, and in fact, judging from a poll that I put up on YouTube a couple of days ago, only like 2% of you use the Time system. So let me take a few minutes and I'll quickly show you how these work. Okay, so the first thing to mention about these pedals is that they function in pretty much the same way as any other kind of clipless system. Well, most clipless systems on the market. Foot in at the front, press down and you're clipped in. and then to unclip, swing your heel out. So pretty simple stuff. On the back here, this is where you set the release tension. So you've got the carbon plate, which acts as a spring there, and then running across it, you've got this little rod. So put a flat blade screwdriver in there and turn that, and it basically preloads that spring and increases the release tension. I've got it on the lowest setting at the moment, and it's absolutely fine. But another cool feature about these, well, it's from the Time pedals. It's called the iClick system, and as a result, these knockoffs have it as well, and it's basically like a trigger, so it makes kind of snapping into the pedal really easy. So you've got a little plate at the back here, and let me show you how it functions. So I'll put the shoe in like so, and basically I don't have to press down very hard at all, and you'll see the back of the pedal snap into the cleat. Boom. So yeah, you can see it right there, snapped straight in. And to reset the system, I'll swing my heel out as I normally would, and it's reset, ready to kind of hit that trigger again and snap back in. Yeah, when you get it right, it does make clipping in really smooth actually. Okay, let's talk durability quickly. Now the pedal body itself, I'm pretty confident that's going to be fine. I mean, I've known people get tens of thousands of miles out of their Time Xpresso pedals, and yeah, the pedal body itself is made out of the same materials, so that should be fine. It's the internals that worry me. I mean, I've only used these for a couple of 100 miles, these Costelo ones, and yeah, one of the axles is already starting to get a little bit loosey-goosey. That shielded bearing and that nylon bushing in there, yeah, I just don't think they're going to last. Having said that, I did actually see a video of this guy that replaced the nylon bushing, and I'll put a clip up now. He replaced it with yeah, some actual cartridge bearings, so that could be an option, I guess. But still, what are these actually like to use out and about on the road? Okay, so the first thing to mention about using these knockoff pedals is that when you're actually clipped in on the bike and cycling down the road, if they feel pretty good actually. So they're a nice wide pedal, so you feel nice and stable on the bike. And yeah, the cleats, they offer 5 degrees of float as well, which is pretty much perfect for me. Plus the release tension out of the box is pretty much spot on, and it's super easy to change it as well. But actually clipping in to these pedals, that's where it falls down slightly, I think. So on a day like today, when it's nice and sunny and you can see exactly what you're doing, especially with that iClick-esque system, when you get your foot position right, these do clip in really nicely. But over the last few months, especially because it's been winter, basically, I have been doing a lot of my cycling in the dark after the sun has gone down, and that's where these fall down slightly. They're not quite as foolproof to clip in the dark as like Look Keo or SPD-SL. I feel like I just can't quite find the front of the pedal reliably each time. Just something about them, they're not quite as foolproof as some of the other pedal systems on the market. But still, with all this being said, should you actually buy yourself a pair of these knockoffs? Well, let's hand it back to Luke in the studio and we'll wrap this thing up. Right then, are these pedals right here, are these worth 50 quid? Well, I guess 60 if you include the import duties. Honestly, no, I don't really think they are. Now, when I first got hold of them, initially I was actually quite impressed with them. So the build quality seems decent, materials are good, they're super lightweight, and they work as kind of advertised, I guess. But after taking them apart and seeing the innards, I just don't think these are gonna last. Now that shielded bearing in there, I mean, any hint of dirt or moisture and that thing's going to be ruined basically. And that white nylon bushing in place of a proper bearing, I mean, it's ingenious, don't get me wrong, from a cost cutting perspective, but if it lasts more than a few months, yeah, I'll be very surprised. Also, the cleats that came with the pedals were a massive pain to set up. Now the cleats themselves seem to be pretty good quality, but the mounting hardware that came with them, the screws basically, yeah, they were too narrow. So let me show you quickly. Okay, so this is my cycle shoe, and this is actually an AliExpress special that I'm testing at the moment. Got a nice carbon fiber sole there. So yeah, review for this coming up soon. I actually quite like these. But anyway, we're getting a bit sidetracked. This is the cleat here, and as I mentioned, the cleat is pretty good. But the issue is that the screws that came to mount this to the shoe, yeah, they're just too narrow. So this is the screw that they expect you to use to mount the cleat, and this is the width of a normal kind of cleat screw. You can see it's just super narrow. So the problem is, if I'd have used this to mount it onto the shoe, you can imagine that the plastic might just shear through that screw. And I've heard a couple of people on some forums claim that that's actually what happened. So because the screws were too narrow, when you're lifting up on the pedal, the cleat just sheared off. So basically the mounting hardware that came to attach these cleats to your shoes with these pedals, yeah, it's no good. I mean, look, at the end of the day, 50 to 60 quid is actually a really decent budget for a set of clipless pedals. I mean, for less than 40 quid, you could pick up these XU Star pedals on Amazon, and they're basically indestructible. I mean, my set here, yeah, I've used these for about 3,000 odd miles, and they look basically brand new. Yeah, they use some really good quality bearings. They're Look Keo compatible, clip in like a dream. Yeah, these are a good option. I mean, you could even look into the China play pedals that I covered in a previous episode. So they're kind of imitation speed plates that you can get on AliExpress, and I think they're going for around 35 quid at the moment. So yeah, they could be worth a look as well. So yeah, unless you're super concerned with saving weight and you're planning to kind of overhaul the innards of these anyway, yeah, I'd probably steer well clear of these. But as I've got them, I'm actually going to keep them on the bike, and we'll see if the hypothesis about the innards failing on me, yeah, we'll see how long that takes to kind of come to pass, I guess. But yeah, there we are. Interesting episode, I think. I always find it fascinating getting products like this in the post and trying to figure out where they've cut the costs out of the kind of manufacture, especially with something like this where it is so close in design to the original. And on that note, I had a bit of a look into Costelo, and rather than being just like a random name that they've chosen for these pedals, they are actually a registered company, and they're trying to appear as a legitimate brand in their own right. That much is clear. I mean, they sponsor a cycle team, so they're trying to build a bit of a reputation around this brand name Costelo. But I had a look at some of their products, and yeah, at least a couple of them are just remanufactured or rebranded knockoffs, just like the pedals we've looked at today. I mean, check these out. So they sell what they call their Costelo XC12 mountain bike pedals, and here they are up against the Attack XC12 mountain bike pedals, again from Time. But it's not just pedals, they seem to be doing it with frames as well. So here's their Costelo Speed Machine X frame, and here it is up against the BMC Road Machine X frame. Yeah, pretty similar. And thank you to Andrew Bedford in the comments for putting me onto that one. I mean, look, maybe they're licensing these designs, maybe they've changed them significantly in some way that I'm kind of not seeing, or maybe the designs themselves aren't protected at all with like design patents or something like that. I mean, for all I know, this could be all kind of completely above board. But yeah, what do you lot out there? What do you think? It certainly seems a little bit fishy to me, but maybe there's something I'm kind of missing. I don't know. And yeah, and Costelo, if you're out there and you want to give your side of the story, then my email is down there in the video description. So kind of, yeah, drop me an email. Maybe we can have a chat. But yeah, there we go. But before we go, I did want to give you a little bit of a teaser about some of the stuff we got coming up this year, because I've got some really cool stuff in the works. So Elite Wheels, I did a video about they were really cheap, basically, pair of wheels that I got from them last year from AliExpress. They got in touch and they're sending me a really tasty looking pair of wheels for my road bike here behind me. They're super lightweight and they look like so good. So yeah, I've got that on the way. And also, finally, I'm building a gravel bike, basically. So I'm getting all the bits together as we speak. And I know loads of you out there have been asking me for one. In fact, I've got the tires here that I picked up. Let's get behind the lights. That I picked up for an absolute steal the other day. So these are 700 by 40C tires from Schwably. I don't know.
Schwab.
Yeah, so I got those, I got the frame on the way, and also I've got a really cool braking setup that I've never kind of used before or never come across before for the gravel bike. So yeah, it's going to be a good one. So basically, this year I've got a shed load of stuff coming up. So yeah, so get subscribed so you don't miss it. Anyway, that's it. So subscribe if you like this kind of stuff. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this little thing I've done today. And if you've got any questions or any comments, leave them down below. I'll try and get back to as many of you as I can. But yeah, that is it. Hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, see you next time. Ciao, ciao. Sayonara. Wow.